welcome to another episode of Rim Shots with Sean right here on the Rock Rage Radio Network. I have a return guest. This is fun. Mr. Sam Morris, you also know him as Sam Spade. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Sean. How's it going? It is a pleasure to be back and pleasure talking to you again.
Well, I'm going to hit you with something. I'm a big supporter and proponent of networking, and you sent me the email and you said, you guys, your band, and the Devil Crew, man, you have a new offering coming out that was produced by Rick Brown, and I interviewed Rick 2 weeks ago for my show.
Yeah.
And what prompted me to get in touch with him is I found it was an article on Cher Ross.
Okay.
And Cher's formerly of Dixon, and Cher's involved in the project as well. So why don't you just go ahead and tell us right out of the gate what you guys have on the go?
Yeah, absolutely. On July 5th, we released our third record, the third record from the Midnight Devils, called So Hard It Hurts. First new single that came out called Get Laid. Produced, written, and Cher and Bam also helped produce this whole record. We went down to Florida in January and stayed with those guys for like a week, all three of us, and recorded this record. Did this all in between tours, and we came out spitting with the first single, Get Laid, written by Rick Browdy. And then we started our Australian tour, a Japanese tour. We did the UK and we did Norway. And now we're finally back home, and we got a chance to kind of sit down and talk about this new record and this new single.
So Rick, it's interesting that the article is basically he was trying to find a place to move to that was closer to Cher and her husband. And that's what prompted me. I'm like, you know what? Why have I not reached out to this man? Because I interviewed Tom Werman because Tom had his book.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a connection there too. And it's interesting because you and I met last year and we did the interview, but it just never ceases to amaze me how many connections people have through this crazy business that we're part of.
It's amazing, and us of all people, because they are the kind of royalty, I think, of rock and roll when you really start to think about it. And I asked them questions about Tom too when I saw Rick. I was like, I need to know, what did he do? His name's on these records, like what was his role, and he can kind of tell me. But Bam and Cher and Rick, they all live like within a block of each other down in Florida, and we went down there, stayed in Rick's house, and really just had a blast recording this record. Like, as I really think as a band should, we were removed from our comfort zone and kind of placed down in Florida in January, and those guys just took us in, and it was one of the coolest experiences we've ever had.
I mean, and here's what was cool. I reached out to him and he said, yeah, no problem. I'll gladly come on your podcast. The only thing I don't want to talk about is the Poison record, which
Right.
we kind of avoided. However, when you go and you look at that man's history outside of now, you guys, he had 30, I think it was 36, high selling major albums. And I mean, I was asking him about Double Gonzo Live and some of those ones. And he said his favorite album that he did, was Dogs D'Amour, which you guys have a connection on what you're doing with that too, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Bam Ross, drummer for Dogs D'Amour, helped produce, and he did a lot of the engineering, a lot of the producing, a lot of the background. He did background vocals. And the cool thing about Bam was that we had met Bam through when he was playing with the Choir Boys, and it was our first really, really big tour of the USA. And we had gotten like a call a week prior, and they're like, all right, we need you guys in Salt Lake City. You're opening for the Choir Boys for a month. And we're like, this is it, the big time, right? Like, we finally made it, and we made it 2 weeks through that tour, and COVID hit.
Yeah.
And so we became friends with Bam, and unfortunately it was really short-lived. And it's weird how, like you said, the connection was made where 2 years later, Bam would be producing our record. It's so cool, and so cool to have somebody that we kind of knew, like a face that we knew going into the recording process.
So was he the connection to Rick and Cher, or how was that made?
Actually not. The connection came, we were on tour in Italy, and our Italian tour manager's name's Fabio Pacino. And he was actually the one that Fabio was the guy. He goes, I love the Midnight Devils. I love what you guys are doing, but you don't have the songs. Right. Talk to Rick. And I go, who's Rick? He goes, well, he did the first Poison record, Double Live Gonzo, all these great. And I was like, there's no way this guy's going to do our record. We're just three dudes, like three American dudes. Nobody's going to even care. And I called Rick up right there in Torino, Italy, And I talked to him on the phone while we were on tour, and he was all about it. And kind of the rest just started working. And I go, I think this is going to be the guy. It's like the universe telling us this is the guy.
Well, and I mean, it's funny because I mean, for anybody, and he's an open book, right? Like like he said, he didn't want to talk about the first Poison, and we didn't touch on it that much. Although he did, I guess it's pretty hard to not because I mean it was a 5-time platinum. But I'm looking something up here, Sam, because I mean just for people to get I guess a flair for who you guys had the opportunity to work with. This is no small stakes, man. Um,
No.
so just to go through, look what the cat dragged in. Up Your Alley by Joan Jett. Back to Pussycat. Dogs D'Amour. Kill for Thrills, 2 albums. Smash Gladys. 3 Ted Nugent albums, including Intensities, Scream Dream, and Double. I remember hearing Double Gonzo live, and I told him when the first time I heard Wang Dang Sweet Poo-Tang, I was just like, wow. And I actually had the opportunity to go back and ask him how it was recorded and just stuff like that. So I mean, Herman Rarebell, so
Of course.
this is not a small feat that you guys have taken on here and become part of.
No, and we totally did. Once we kind of broke the ice, and it became it's this cool thing because my wife and I are headed to Florida in a few weeks. We're gonna go down and do vacation, but I thought, man, I really think that we need to make this a thing where we're going to go down and hang out with Sharon, Bam, and Rick on our vacation. It's that kind of a relationship that we have with these guys. But of course, like once we got to know them, the rock and roll nerd in us were like, so what was it like working with these guys, And he would tell us like working with the Scorpion, and he had so many great stories, and he has such a cool way. You talk to him a cool way to look at it, where you and I are like, that's Ted Nugent, or we're looking on his wall and seeing the platinum records of Poison and all this cool stuff, and I want to know. And he told us he told us as many stories as we could possibly, the good, the bad, the ugly, and I love him for it. And the one really good kicker I have for you is Sniper and I. We flew into Florida and we were sitting there eating dinner with Rick. Rick's like, I'll take you out for dinner. I'm like, okay, this is really cool. Like, we're going to hang out with Rick, and we're sitting there at this little diner, and this little small girl comes over and she goes, you guys look like you're in a rock and roll band. I go, yes, we're here recording a record. And her dad walks up to the table and he goes, you guys look like you're in Poison. And I thought, of all things, of all people to say, like, we get it all the time, but to have Rick sitting there and some random guy comes up and says, you guys look like Poison, and they're like, if you only had any idea.
Well, and it's I get why he doesn't want it, because one of the things that I've found about doing this podcast over the last couple of years is, and not to dump on anybody, but you see other people that are, professional, or they should be professional. They're asking questions that are like been asked 1 million times. I saw a guy asking Randy Rhoads Rudy Sarzo, who used to play with Randy Rhoads. That was like, really? So I get the fact that he doesn't want to answer those, but I mean, I asked him something stupid as a drummer, like, "Did you guys use a click track on that?" And he just kind of laughed at me, right? I mean, so you're talking about the geeking out stuff, absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
They're just as big of nerds as we are, and that's the cool thing is musically, Cher and Bam, like, they have this weird chemistry that they complement each other so well, and Rick kind of comes in there and is totally the cherry on top, and Rick's just as nerdy as we are, and that was, I think, kind of where we met. He loves rock and roll just as much as we do.
It's funny because I've talked to Cheryl a little bit. I mean, she seems like she's really digging the whole real estate thing, and which is cool. And I got a connection with her because I've got to know Lorraine Lewis quite well over the last couple of years. So it's funny how things work. So just talk a little bit about this Australian tour. For Canadians to go to the States, it's pretty tough because there's a massive amounts of money you got to pay for visas and stuff like that. What does that look like for you guys going to other countries?
We've been doing it now for 3 years. We've been an international touring rock and roll band for 3 years. And a lot of it is planning on our side and planning on the other side. Like, we really put a lot of effort into starting these things 8 months in advance and really kind of working to make sure that it's as easy and as smooth as possible. Now, a US band going out of the country is much easier than any other band coming into the USA.
Yep.
That's just how it is, and that's the fact. So for us, it's really easy. It doesn't take a whole lot. Like you get on a plane and you fly over there, and they check your bags, and that's generally just about it. But for international bands that come to the USA, there are all those customs forms, and you got to have the visas, and you got to have all your stuff together. So it's like an advantage for us as a US band, but anybody else, they want to come to the USA. It's tough, man. And I tell people that like it's tough for us to even tour in the USA because the distances are so big,
Yep.
and people don't come out like they do in Europe.
Yep. No, that's fair. And I mean, I had the opportunity to play in Ireland, Dublin last year, and it was, you're right, it was simple. I mean, I filled out one form, got my passport, and it was done. So I think for Canadians to go down the States right now, if you want to do any sort of touring, it's like $2,100 or something.
Yeah,
It's
I heard
crazy.
that as well.
Yeah.
Did you fly right into Dublin?
So you want to hear something? Here's backwards Canadian wonderful things that it. So I live in Halifax, so I'm east coast of Canada. We had to fly west to Toronto, 2.5 hours to fly seven. So it was a 9-hour flight essentially, and the airline. Yeah, the airline messed up our connection, so we get stuck in Toronto a night before. But we ended up getting, money and stuff from them. But it's not a direct flight, man. And then you're coming back, and you just want to go home, and you actually see your home province. You're flying over it, knowing you're not going to see it for that 4 hours. So, but yeah, no, it was easy. I mean, customs was simple.
Our one Dublin experience. So we played in Ireland one time, well, twice now. But the first time we had to, and that was on our first international tour. We were sporting Enough's Enough, and we were greener than green on that tour. But we got into England. We did about a week in England. They go, okay, you guys have to take the ferry over from England into Ireland, and I'm like, what is this going to involve? And it was right when Brexit happened, so like we didn't know if we were going to get over. We had to inventory all of our stuff. We finally get on the ferry. We get over. We're like, okay, we're going to make the show. This is actually going to happen. We pull up to customs. And they go, what's going on with all these people in this van? And our driver goes, oh, it's 2 American rock and roll bands going to play a show in Dublin. And the guy's like, pull the van over right now. And they pulled us all out of the van, detained us, had the police dogs search the van. And I thought, man, this is it. I think I'm probably going to be calling my parents from an Irish prison cell and say, Mom, on my first tour, we've been arrested.
Yeah.
And we never made it. We never even made the show. So.
Well, they got this thing over there called Ryanair, which is very cool because and we didn't do it, but you could fly from Dublin to Liverpool for like $50 return. Wow. It was crazy. Did get to see Phil Lynot's grave though. That was very cool.
I didn't see his grave, but I saw the statue. It was absolutely amazing.
Well, so we were looking for the statue, couldn't find it, and then finally found it, and then the next day found it again, but totally by accident. It was really funny how it worked. But so what's the plans with the album, and how's it been going in terms of you pushing it? You had mentioned that your tour manager said you needed songs. That obviously happened. How's that all going?
It's going great. So July 5th, the album was released. We've been touring since that moment that it was dropped. First single, Get Laid, the first video, that's the Rick Browdy song. And really that was just us thinking like instead of doing a cover song, let's do this song. It's so perfect, and it fits the mode of the Midnight Devils, and it fits the story. And we didn't know how our crowd would receive it. And now that we've been playing it live on tour, it's to get into life of its own, and it's turning into this big live celebration party song, which is, I guess, exactly what we wanted it to be, to kick off the album with just this big banging party song that everybody could relate to. And I think that's the testament to Rick's producing, Rick's songwriting, Rick's kind of vision. And you always think of him like a producer as you always go back to like Brian Epstein, like the fourth member. And Rick really did. He stepped into that role really well. So the album's just chock full of awesome rock and roll songs that Rick really trimmed the fat and created something that's really cool that I'm extremely proud of. We have a record that I don't think is like an overnight success, but I think it's the next logical continuation of where we left off in 2022 with Never Beg For It. So we're just going to keep going. And that's really what it is. Like, we're just touring, grinding away, because that's what we do best. We love being a road band. We're home now, but our hearts are kind of always out there on the road and on tour, and being in those live situations. I think that's where the Midnight Devils flourish best, and these songs fit into our set list perfectly.
So I've slowly been picking off. I mean, I've had a bunch of producers slash engineers, but producers that I've obviously, loved, listened to growing up. Everybody from Tom Worman to Rick to Max Norman to Michael Wagner to Martin Birch to all these guys. I've got about 4 of them done so far. All of them have kind of a very similar thing when you talk to them, in
Yeah.
that they like to have control of what's going on, but they also like the band to be themselves. Is that what you found with working with him?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So a lot of it was such a crazy experience because Rick didn't know us. He didn't know us from Adam. We had talked on the phone, and going into the project in January, he goes, I would like you guys to record all the songs as acoustic demos. And we're like, you want us to do what? Like, we're a rock band. This doesn't really work like that. But we went in the studio and did it, and it sounded really cool. And when we finally got down to Florida in January, he goes, you guys actually had yourselves together and you were prepared for this record, and I appreciate you doing that. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take these lyrics that you've written and rework them. And I was like, you're going to rework my lyrics? Like, how difficult is that as a songwriter? Those are your babies, and like, you really have to set your ego aside for the betterment of the album and the betterment of the songs. And I didn't know how it would work. The proof is in the final product. Like, Rick really crafted my songs, the lyrics that I had written, and turned them into even better songs. That's the cool thing that he did. And a lot of the jokes and stuff, that we had the same sense of humor, kind of like that filthy sense of humor, that tongue-in-cheek kind of Bon Scott, the way that those guys write. He has the same kind of philosophy that I do. So Rick really looked at these songs and looked at my lyrics specifically and created something, took my ideas, but made them even better.
It's interesting when you get guys at that level, because I mean, like, I'm never one to go for, the salacious singer. Like, I'll just ask questions, and I find all of them are pretty forthcoming with information. Like, so for example, Tom Worman, I asked him straight up, who's his favorite drummer to work with in the studio, and he said without hesitation, Bunny Carlos from Cheap Trick. He said he was amazing, and he wouldn't name a worse, but he did say the hardest working guy that needed the most work, that did a great job in the end, was Ricky Rocket from Poison. And I was like, that's cool. Then Alan Niven. So Alan Niven, who managed Great White and Guns N' Roses, who produced too, he's become a bud. And he didn't, I asked him a little bit about Axl Rose, and it was like, well, kind of a lot more than what I thought I was going to get, right? Did you find there was any stories like that when you guys were in the studio, just about, past experiences, and, don't do this because blah, blah, blah did this, or don't do that because X did that, or how did that work?
I think that they had this way, and Rick, I think, was not nervous, but apprehensive coming out of retirement to do this record. Right. So there was a certain way that they had done everything in the past, and now that they were kind of coming in, Bam and Cher's studio, they just kind of put it together. It was the first full record that they were doing, and so they were almost kind of at a not, I wouldn't say a learning curve, but they were figuring it out on the fly as we were. So I was watching, and what I do is I watch and I kind of take in and learn, like, what are their techniques? What is Rick kind of getting at? Like, I don't see the master plan here. And he would come in and he would be at every session and listen and take notes. Every session that we did, he was like 12 hours a day. He's a machine, just in there taking notes. And I go, this is how, like, the really good guys do this. And I think this is how he's kind of sinking his teeth in. And then he would kind of communicate to Cher, and they almost had this like nonverbal back and forth communication that I thought was just incredible. And so when they would like set up the drums, and Bam would be in there, and I just kept thinking to myself, like, this is Bam from Dogs to More, like, setting up the drums. Like, this is the coolest thing ever. And that was kind of the vibe going into it. I had to play the bass in the control room, sitting there with Cher. And I'm like, this is a lot of pressure, because I'm an okay bass player, but this is Cher. Like, she is the best, So it was like that pressure that we kind of had to deal and handle with. And I think those guys really had it together. They knew what they were doing, and they'd done it before a million times. So what we did is just like we were ourselves completely and utterly. It's impossible for us to not be like this weird, annoying rock band of guys that just laugh and hang out and smoke too much weed. But they totally worked around it and really built this record so hard it hurts and turned it sonically into something that I knew it was possible, but I didn't think it'd turn out this good.
Well, I think that's amazing because anytime I've ever had a live engineer or I've been in the studio, if a drummer's involved, I always find I get my best output because if I'm doing good, they don't tell me, which is great. And
Right.
if I'm doing bad, they're very quick to point out what I'm doing wrong. So it's a
Yep.
very good coaching thing. So I know I'm never going to sound bad. Did you kind of get that with her? Did she give you any pointers or any coaching when
Yeah.
you were in there?
Yeah, for a lot of for the bass tracks, like the core tracks, we all sat in a room, all three of us, and the drums were there. And Jimmy Mess, our drummer, walks in, Jimmy Mess, he's this rock and roll space alien, and they're like, how is this guy gonna play the drums? And luckily he's really good at playing to a click track. It's like one of his weird Rain Man skills. He's great at this. So we all would be three in a room. We played the tracks. I would sing like a scratch vocal. And if they liked it, they'd let us keep going. If they didn't, Rick would pop his head and be like, I think you guys need to change this. I think you need to change this and do it again. And there wasn't too many tracks where we went over 3 or 4 recordings. We were pretty much on. And once we knew what we were doing, Rick kind of let us run with it, but pointing us in the right direction. So he always had his hand there guiding us in the right direction.
Right on. And I will say there was a tip in there as a drummer, regardless of what Eddie Trunk says about tracks, if you can play to a quick track, your life will be super easy in the studio.
Absolutely. It's the savior. The savior of our band is Jimmy can play to a click track. And that is like just the coolest thing ever.
That's the facts. I'll fight anybody to the death on that. So you said you're home. What do you guys have on the go for the next bit? Are you taking it easy? What's up?
Yeah, so for the most of this year, we're kind of working on we moved back into the creative side. So with Get Laid, with the single that came out, the video, and we haven't had a lot of chance to be home to kind of do the publicity and really work on what is going to be the next video, what's going to be the next single. The vinyl is going to be coming out. So the cool thing, and I'll tell you this, you'll find this very interesting. So the Get Laid single, Rick wrote the song, and that was his kind of baby. He goes, I think we should do a 6-minute dance version of Get Laid. And I was like, so they remixed it, adjusted it to make it so that it kind of fit into a club setting. I'm a strip club DJ, and I think Rick had it in his mind, like, I want to be able to play Get Laid at the strip club in a dance version. So we're going to be releasing Get Laid as a vinyl single that has the original song on one side and then the dance single on the other.
And I think that's smart business because everybody knows in this day and age, man, anything you can do to capture somebody's imagination that's honest and legal and whatever, you got to do it because the attention spans of people have never been so small. And it's you got to do what you got to do. Where are my viewers here on Rock Rage Radio going to find out, and listeners, sorry, on Rock Rage Radio, are going to find out about how to get their hands on this, about you guys, all that stuff?
TheMidnightDevils.com. It's kind of the one-stop shop. We do everything from there. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, X, whatever. We're also streaming live, or streaming platforms, all of them, Amazon, Spotify. We're kind of everywhere. And if anybody wants to reach out, we're really, really good at responding on social media. It's kind of what we do. And it's easy to find us. So jump on there. We have amazing merch. We really pride ourselves in creating KISS level of really cool merchandise ideas. We have amazing imagery, a great artist, and we produce these really cool, even down to like Bic lighters, just some really cool stuff. Vinyls, CDs. We got tour shirts from the UK. And it all leads up. Our last show is December 7th, I believe, in Cincinnati. We're doing one big show, Kenny Ozfest. It'll be our last show of the year before we kick off like a US tour and another European run next year.
Fantastic. And I can vouch for that because you can't see it, but you guys sent me some cool swag, and it's up here in my shelf. And it's the first thing I noticed was, okay, these are pointing around, man. It's not a couple of cheesy little stickers and some other things to it. So it was awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
I want to thank you for doing this. It's always a pleasure. And, as I said, anytime, man, I like talking to you guys. We're on the same page in terms of music. And, we're slowly collecting similar friends. So that's awesome.
And send me your address. I'll get you like a Rick Browdy, Cher Ross, Bam Ross produced CD, so you can add that to your collection too.
I will do that. Back on the Rock Rage Radio after this, kids.